Hey, welcome back, everyone. So I hope everyone had a good holiday. We've been MIA for a little while because of the holidays. It's been tough for Sine and I to connect. But hey, Sine, how are you?
Hey, what's up, Chirag? Good to catch up again. So excited for today's episode, and yeah, good to get back in the swing of things here and kick the year off with a fun, exciting episode where we get to expand our banter from just the two of us to add a special guest for our session today. So yeah, super excited.
Yeah, for sure. I think what we're going to be talking about today is something that we've all been thinking about a lot recently. Is AI and specifically AI's impact. Generally on our society, but today specifically we're talking about education, and a few other topics, but I think that is the main crux of our discussion. So we have a special guest, Lauren Escobar-Phani. Um, hey, Lauren, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Lauren and I have been friends for what? Oh, probably over 20 years, right?
Yeah.
Um, and Lauren is a teacher in the New York City public school system. So Lauren, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi. So I have been teaching for almost 20 years in New York City public schools. I started out in middle school and now I teach high school for the past, I think, 7 years. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about teaching and AI and all those cool things.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Lauren. So excited to have you here, and I think Chirag and I have spent like a lot of time talking about just all the different impacts of, just AI, the progression of AI, the risks associated with it. How do we, continue to drive ethical and moral development of AI? And obviously, one of the areas that we think AI is going to have a tremendous impact on is education. And so, before we kind of jump into the meat and potatoes of how AI is going to be impacting your profession. Love to hear a little bit more background on why you went into teaching, what inspired you to become a teacher, and any other kind of general perspective you have on your 20 plus year career in teaching.
So I think I kind of always wanted to be a teacher. When I was a kid, that was one of the things that I always said. If people asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said a teacher. And then I guess the end of high school, early college, I kind of talked myself out of it. And I majored in English and I wanted to write. I wanted to work in publishing. I wanted to be in the book industry. And I did a lot of internships and things like that. There were no jobs. Um, I worked at a nursing home for a few years, and I loved it. I worked, as a uh, recreational therapy is what I did. And I loved it, but it was a similar situation. There were no jobs. And then one day I was riding the subway and I saw an ad for the New York City Teaching Fellows. And, it was for career changers, people who had other jobs, were kind of mid-career and wanted to make a change. And I don't know, it just kinda hit me, that's what I wanted to do. Like, I've always loved working with kids. They kind of it sounds so cheesy, but they give me hope, that they're so resilient and that, like, the way they view the world is so different than the way that we do as adults. And it was just something that I realized I really wanted to do. So, yeah, I went back to school, got my master's, and here I am.
Awesome. And what grades have you taught?
I started out teaching 6th and 7th grade. I taught middle school for, like 10, 12 years. And now I teach high school. I teach at a transfer high school, so it's not so much grades. It's students who they are at risk for whatever reason. Maybe they were about to drop out of school. They missed school for a while. There might have been jail time, there might have been a baby, there might have been sickness. They're kind of on their last shot, and they come to me, and we help them earn those credits and finally get their diploma.
Amazing. It's awesome.
Yeah, it sounds like really impactful work that you do there, especially now with the transfer school.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So I guess that's a really interesting, like having a cross section of middle school, high school, seeing how I guess different students, especially, get even segmented between, let's call it our conventional education method, perhaps more of what you were doing when you were following a middle school curriculum versus a segment of a population that are now at risk or need a little bit extra attention to sort of just get the foundation or fundamental like value or importance of finishing school, and you needing to kind of coach them or guide them perhaps in a different way than just like going through a curriculum that educates them on a given subject or something. um, I think as we look at to me that like kind of talks about personalization and the need for, you know, each student having their own either learning style or their own needs that need to be addressed before you can even, I guess, earn the right to educate them or teach them about a given subject. Can you just speak about your own experience and your own evolution and how you've thought of your responsibility when you're coaching, let's say, a classroom versus handling these at-risk children?
Yeah, I know when I started teaching at the school where I am now, I definitely came at it differently. And it was such a shock to the system. I used to teach 11-year-old girls. And now I was teaching, these maybe 20-year-old, 17-year-old boys, and girls. But, they're like we were talking about earlier, they're gigantic, they're bigger than I am. Um, and I definitely came at it as like, "Oh, you know what you're doing, and, just listen to what I'm saying, and you've got this." And I very quickly realized that was something that wasn't gonna work. Like, me just telling them, like, "Do this, and then turn it in, and I'll grade it," that wasn't working. And so I realized that it was a lot more about relationships, and I kinda changed the way that I talk to students. It became a lot more about understanding who they are, where they come from, why they're here. There a lot of them now, they're making the choice to be at our school. They don't have to be at school at all. They can sign themselves out, they can go get a GED. Um, but kind of figuring out the why of why are they there and connecting that to what we're doing, it made so much of a difference. And once I realized, to see them all individually as people, it made it a lot smoother, and we were actually able to get places.
Yeah, it sounds like the key for personalization in your most recent position was critical to your success. And perhaps in the classroom setting, you don't have the luxury of being so personalized because you have to teach 20 to 30 children and you're trying to get through a curriculum, and it doesn't afford you the flexibility to connect at an individual level like in your current role. Is that fair?
Yes. Yeah. Um, yeah, there's a lot of I mean, I know there's a movement to kind of standardize curriculum as well as standardizing the way that we assess students, and it just yeah, that never works, I don't think. You need to meet kids where they're at, and if especially with I teach English, so when we're doing things like reading and writing, the ability to give them choices is just so important.
That makes sense.
I think you said something really important there. And I just want to talk about a little bit about like the purpose, right? So, um, I just went through an online workshop where one of the big topics of it was figuring out your purpose, and I think you know I kind of in the past have written that off, but even at 47 years old, I found it very useful to go through some exercises to figure out purpose. And I think the instructor said something really interesting to me was that you can be get really good at productivity and doing the right things to make sure you're moving forward. But if you're going in the wrong direction, then it's all pointless, right? So that first step of figuring out your purpose and make sure you're going in the right direction is really really important. So it sounds like you're tackling kind of the same thing with these students as well.
Yeah, both for me and for them, absolutely.
Um, that's important, and I think, like, to your point, Chirag and Lauren both, that if you don't know where you're going, it's hard to get there. I think what's been so interesting is both in trying to identify your purpose as well as trying to help, well, trying to figure out which tools you can leverage to help you to get your objective meet and to reach your purpose has been evolving and changing at I mean, at really an unbelievable pace. AI, I think, has had such a tremendous impact, and the launch of ChatGPT has changed almost every industry. Um, and I think we're still in the really early days of figuring out what its impact is going to be. And, a lot of what Chirag and I talk about is how do we ensure the safe and responsible development of AI tools as they're coming out now and as they evolve so rapidly into the future. Can you speak at all about how AI has impacted your work in the near term? And, how are you thinking about AI in general when it comes to the work that you do?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and before you I'm sorry, Lauren, just one more thing to add on, if you don't mind, is if you could even talk about, you've had a almost 20-year career, you said. Excuse me. Um, how has technology in general affected, or what trends have you seen in technology over your 20 years, and how have they impacted your students and the way you teach your students?
Yeah. So I think, I don't know if it's education as a whole is very kind of slow to adopt these, advances that we're making all the time. I find that educational technology in general tends to be more for for show. There's lots of like, hey, you can use this game in your classroom, or like, look at the way you can decorate your PowerPoint in a different way, as opposed to like a meaningful thing. But then it all kind of shifted during COVID. We were all home, whether we were teaching or learning, and we were doing it over the computer. And it seemed so great that we had all these resources. I could, end up in one of my students' living rooms where I remember reading Romeo and Juliet with my classes together, and we were watching the movie and we were acting it out together and we were writing about it together. And all of that was great. But the fact that it all happened during COVID, and I don't know if this would be different if it wasn't then, when we all came back together, it felt very different. And I feel like what it did was serve to kind of separate everybody. And students kind of realized that they didn't have to engage as much. And it became more about using technology to kind of take themselves out of the equation. Like I started getting many more papers that were very clearly written by AI. Um, and there were so many conversations that we had about like, you have to be doing the thinking, even if you're having somebody help you, or you have to be putting in the work and revising it and editing it and make sure it matches what you're trying to say. And yeah, it's been frustrating. It's been interesting to watch kids really trying to like take themselves out of the learning and put technology in its place.
Yeah. I heard two things that would love to talk a little bit more about, and maybe there's a correlation, maybe there isn't. But as you talked about coming back from being virtually in your students' living rooms to the classroom setting, and the lack of engagement, or I guess just continued desire to be isolated and be more technology engaged versus physically engaged. Um, do you think that has any correlation with the children also now just wanting to leverage tools like ChatGPT and AI tools to do their work as opposed to wanting to do the work themselves, or do you think those are two separate things?
No, I definitely think it's related. Yeah, I think as a society, we make a big deal out of, look at how helpful this tool is. Look at, you can have so much more free time if you just use this thing to go grocery shopping for you, or to make your to-do list or whatever. And students are seeing that and trying to do the same thing, but not really seeing the, I don't know, the mental work that you have to put into that.
Yeah, I can't help but just by that comment, Chirag, like I'd say one of the topics that we talk about the most is about the negative impact of social media on mental health and driving loneliness. And, we do as a society tend to romanticize technological advancements and encourage us as a society to adopt it quickly infuse it into our lives. without thinking about the long-term consequences. And I think only in retrospect have we seen what social media products like Twitter and Facebook have done to our society in multiple regards, right? Loneliness, but also the point that you made about engagement, the physical engagement. I mean, you could probably just see a steep decline in physical engagement as you've seen the acceleration of social media and technology adoption increase. And I think that same playbook seems to be also applied, especially within education, where when we romanticize tools like ChatGPT and AI-enabled technology to help us be more efficient in the world, we haven't really thought through, from my perspective, how to responsibly introduce AI into the education system. And without being purposeful about how we leverage AI in our education system, we run a risk of unintended consequences like we're experiencing now. Um, what are your thoughts? Like, have you thought about, hey, how, if you could wave a magic wand, AI could be introduced, or how can AI be introduced and leveraged in the education system in a productive way?
I mean, I think it's the idea of it more as a partnership than as something that can replace the actual work that you're doing. Um, like, I've used it to say, like, could you read this email for me and make sure it's got the right tone, right? It's great for stuff like that, but I tried it for writing an essay for an assignment that I was assigning to students. I think it was about an argument essay. I don't remember the topic. And I had to tell it like 5 separate times. I said, where did you get these sources from? And ChatGPT said to me, I made them up.
Oh my God.
Like, and it said, oh no, you're right. And it's, I think it's the fact that we need to be aware that it's going to do what you tell it to do. And I've had these conversations with students about research as well, that like Google is only as good as the Googler, right? I'm very hesitant to say let's just use AI without actually teaching people how to use it. You need to give it the right directions, and we don't always know what those directions are.
Yeah, it's so true. And a funny anecdote is that someone said to me that their daughter, who goes to Imperial College in London, um, last February they basically banned any AI tools in the school, and then 2 months later, the Russell Group, which is the I guess the overseeing body of all colleges and universities in the UK, came out with a statement on AI and required students to take courses on how to use AI responsibly. So it's such a quick turnaround within 2 months because our first inclination, yes, is to say, you know what, this is not going to be useful, so let's ban it. But then you quickly come to the realization that the Pandora's box is open. There's no putting it back in. So we're going to have to deal with it, and let's teach people to use it responsibly.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same as any tool, right? I mean, maybe we were against things like Spark Notes and Cliff Notes,
Yeah.
50 years ago, whatever. But now I've seen them, I've used them, and they're incredibly helpful. And I've seen them be really helpful for students who are, they're writing their senior paper on a novel, and they're checking. I had a student the other day reading Handmaid's Tale, and she found someone had made a map of what the US would look like in the time of the Handmaid's Tale, and she had it open as she was reading, and that was super helpful. And I want to encourage students to use whatever tools are available to them, but she's also reading the book, which is the difference. Instead of just relying on AI to read the book for her and make up something about what happened there.
What do
Right. So
you,
almost to
I
use
love
it
that
as like a
example.
co-pilot.
Right.
No, no, sorry, I was just saying
What do you
more to
think
use it as a
encouraged?
co-pilot rather than offloading work. Yeah, to you.
Yeah. And no, sorry, just curious about how, because that seems like what is the desired state based on what you describe. It's like use it as a tool, but not replace, right? Like just reading the book itself. And like how do you encourage more of that? Like have you, like what are some of the tools or techniques you think you can deploy to put that perspective into the kids' heads to say, hey, this is just another tool? Is it just having that conversation, or are there other things that you think through to, have more examples of the kid reading the book while also using ChatGPT or another AI tool to help?
Yeah, I know. That's a great question. I think it's a lot of of just trying it out together. I've come to a place in the past few years where I don't really let students work when I'm not watching them. Um, because if I'm not watching them, they will just not do it and rely on the internet. Whereas when we're doing it together, I can watch them use those tools, or I can say, "Hey, have you tried this? Here's a website I've used. Here's a tool that really helps," and just kind of experimenting together with guidance, I think is the best way to do it. But I think just throwing kids in and saying, "Hey, you can search for anything." Um, they don't have the critical thinking skills yet to say this is a real helpful source and this isn't.
Makes
Yeah.
sense.
One thing that was speaking of critical thinking, I just saw a study that was published last week in I'm looking at it now. It's in Society's Journal. It was a small study, 666 participants, but it looked at the kind of impacts of cognitive offloading and critical thinking with AI tools, and it was pretty sobering. So the data showing, that heavy AI users consistently showed lower critical thinking scores, and that younger professionals were becoming dangerously dependent on AI tools. And we're only 2 years in, and so that's a little bit scary, and especially for younger people, right? Students and people who are still developing their critical thinking skills. If they start offloading some of that work, they're not going to get the baseline kind of knowledge and learning how to learn, right? Essentially, that we all got before the AI age.
Yeah, it's so hard because it's so different than the way we learned how to read. How to read a room, how to read research, how to read people. Like, oh, we by our nature had to make some choices, so we had to be critical thinkers. Like we had to go to the library and pick which book was the best book, which librarian is going to help me. And
Right.
now it's just information is everywhere. Like I teach a debate class, and the students will research their topic and they'll just type something in, and then the first thing that comes up on Google is Google's AI. So it's like whatever they kind of
Yeah.
amalgamate all the search that they did and put it in a little paragraph, and the kids will just write that. And they don't even read what's underneath it. I'm like, where did that come from? And they don't even know where it comes from. They're like, it's Google. Google has the answers. And it's just so fascinating as somebody who has a background in doing literary research and, critical searching that they're not asking anything. They're just, that's information. Okay, it's on a screen, so it must be true.
Yeah. And I wonder how much we I don't know, maybe fighting is not the right word, but maybe resist that progression if we don't have a infrastructure to help drive what the healthy relationship is and the healthy balances of self-guided thinking and physical interactions and reading the book while leveraging AI as a tool versus just taking the shortcut of, hey, I don't need to think about this stuff. I don't need to worry about this anymore. All I need to do is just put the prompt into ChatGPT and it's going to tell me everything I need to do. And how do you see us evolving, teaching children the creative process, the critical thinking skills that are necessary, even with AI as a tool? Because that's not going to teach them the critical thinking. It's kind of like, it's not a chicken or the egg in my perspective. It's like you need the critical thinking in order to leverage the tool properly.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think so much of it comes from early education, and before you put a computer, an iPad, a phone in a kid's hands, like what does that look like? Are we having conversations with them while we're reading, while we're learning about the world, or are they just accepting? um and I think part of it is just like our values as a society. Like, do we value creativity? Do we value asking questions? Do we value innovation and curiosity and wondering, or do we just value work and productivity? And that's what we see in education now. That's why students are just saying, "Hey, AI, write a paper for me," because they just want the outcome. To them, they're not thinking about I'm learning this and I'm learning this about myself and I'm being curious, adding this to the world. They're seeing like if I turn in a paper, I get a grade and a grade gets me a diploma and a diploma gets me a job and that gets me money. And I don't think that's on the students. I think that's our society, that's our values.
I, I was just laughing to
Yeah.
myself, Lauren, because I started thinking like, is the world that we're going in like, who can write the best Google query? Who can write the best ChatGPT prompt? Like, is that what we start evaluating kids on? Is just how good they are at prompting the tool?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just crazy. Yeah.
And then we're getting to the stage where, what's coming next, at least what I've been reading about what's coming next is agentic AI, right? Where you have agents doing the work for you. So you don't even have to be a good prompter. You could just tell an agent what results you want, and then it's up on them to figure out what to do, all the steps in the process. So I mean that's even crazier to think about of, what does the world look like when that happens? And how are we gonna how are we gonna teach our kids to use that? And yeah, so it's just something crazy to think about.
Yeah.
I love the point on values and the early childhood education piece. And I feel like that is really where that that foundational behavior of how to approach education is really critical. Um, if you like, I can, and this goes a little bit back to like the whole personalization and, depending on how you're raised to embrace technology or embrace physical interaction or, just immerse yourself in, a book and go and wander and be creative, or immerse yourself in nature and be creative there. Like, I wonder how much we have to be focused on putting in the right steps in that early education piece so that we're not trying to undo bad habits if they have, if they've already been formed, given that society is putting such an emphasis on technology adoption.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the piece that educators and researchers are always focused on and arguing about is how do we teach kids to read and the best way to approach it. And I think it does come down to a lot of do we just give them the formula like this letter makes this sound and then you put it all together, or is it about meaning making? Is it about using the whole page and the picture and do you have a conversation with them? And yeah, it's interesting because that's what people have been arguing about for, I don't know, the past 70 years in educational research. And now it's all coming to a head because we have tools to make it even easier where you don't have to do the thinking. And do we rely on that or do we not? Yeah.
Yeah, and how much of kind of students' attention spans comes into that? I mean, I've been seeing a lot of in my reading a lot of studies and different even anecdotally of that students just can't read a book anymore. That that's too much. Like they just don't have the attention span to read a full book. I mean, have you been seeing that in your kind of experience?
Yeah, even when I started at this school, I remember during my interview they said to me like, what would you love to teach? And I was like, oh, I've never taught The Great Gatsby. I've been teaching young kids. I'd love to do that. And the administration was kind of like, yeah, it's really hard to read a book. We might do some excerpts. And when I first
Oh my god.
started, I was like, oh, okay. So I guess I just teach excerpts. And I love short stories. So I do a lot of short stories. And then I don't know, at some point I was like, you know what? This is kind of BS. Like, how can you graduate high school without having read a novel? And it's possible. But it's also possible to get them through. It's just that, kids need the support and they need the time and they need to see that that's what's important. If I don't think it's important for them to read a novel and then I assign it, they're not going to do it. But if we as a school or we as a Department of Education or we as a society put value on that, which I think is important, then kids will see the reason for it and the importance, and then they can. I teach a senior level class where they do read a novel all on their own, and they write about it, and then we sit and have a discussion. They have to present what they did for the whole trimester. And those are my favorite moments when kids are able to say, like, I haven't read a book since I was 10, and I read a book for your class, and I feel so good and so proud and so accomplished. But it is a struggle.
Yeah, I mean, have you seen, look, we've had social media for or widespread social media use for what, 10 to 15 years now. Have you seen a decline in or some kind of a trend in attention spans and whether or not even I'd say even attention spans in your classroom of decreasing attention spans at all?
I Yes, and I think so much of it has to do with the phone. It was one thing when Facebook was on the computer and it was a whole process to open it and log in and whatever. And now there's so many different social media accounts and they're constantly at your fingertips and pinging. And where our brains are trained to notice, if something happens on my phone, if there's a sound, if there's something lights up, I'm going to look at it.
Right.
And so, me standing in the front of the room becomes a lot less interesting than what's going on the phone. And that becomes like a pressing issue. I need to know why there's a notification. What if it's my mom? What if it's my boyfriend? What if it's whoever? And it is a struggle to get them to ignore that and to understand
Yeah.
that it's it's so refreshing to be able to sit and have a conversation with your teacher instead of looking at your phone. But it's a fight every day, every period, to get kids to pay attention, to listen.
Yeah, it's that dopamine response, right? And I sat through a great talk by this neuroscientist named TJ Power. He has a new book coming out called The Dose Effect, which is talks about the chemicals in our brain, and one of the major ones is dopamine, obviously. And he talks about throughout our history about how our dopamine response was very level, right? Like anything like as hunter gatherers, we would go hunting or gathering food. Essentially, that was our main purpose, right? And our dopamine response was that it would very slowly increase, and then we would do the thing, right? And then it would come back down, and it would all be pretty level. But now with social media and our modern society, we get these spikes. So you get a spike of dopamine, but then you get a crash right afterwards, and much lower than we're intended to have, right? Like our dopamine level crashes. And then so we look for those spikes. So essentially it's addiction, right? It's a
Mhm.
pattern of addiction. And that's what all the stuff, you look at social media use, porn, all kinds of stuff, right? It's all gives you these, and even sugar gives you these dopamine spikes and crashes. And we have to, yeah, I think it's important that, like you said, we have to remember that those slow pleasure activities that give us a slow rise in dopamine, that they're so much more satisfying and impactful longer term.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just kids, right? Like, I feel it. I
Absolutely.
saw some post online the other day about being so proud of yourself that you were able to watch a movie, like, stare at the screen instead of the other screen. Um,
Yeah.
it's so rewarding to just have a conversation with someone, and I feel like that's what kids are struggling with. And again, the fact that COVID happened in the middle of all of this, like, we were like, "Hey, don't have a conversation with anyone for a whole just stay in your room and that's normal." And then we tried to push them back together. Like it was when we came back, it was like 2 years of me forcing kids to do group work before they would actually do group work. They would like, no, 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 I just want to stare at my phone and not talk to anyone.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the major reasons we started this podcast, right? So,
Yeah, no question. And I like as we're having this conversation and we're looking at how not only your career, Lauren, has evolved, but just like how you've leveraged technology in your classroom to focus on it as a tool. And Chirag, like what you were saying, the advent of, well, not even the advent, but like now the like further proliferation and power of the agentic AI. I'm wondering as that tool becomes even more powerful and we look at what it means to have like good citizens and a productive society that shapes children for the jobs and the needs of the future. Um, do you see your responsibility as a teacher and the teaching profession itself focusing more on values education and what it means to live a good moral life versus, when to use a semicolon, what it means to use subject, noun, verb, all of the kind of technical skills that you impart upon children in your education curriculum being replaced or increasing amount of um, uh, that effort being placed on AI and your need to focus more on good value creation in children being a greater part of your responsibility.
Definitely. Um, Although it's hard to have those conversations with especially teenagers. Um, I said something similar to that the other day to a group of students. I said, I don't remember exactly what we were doing, and I said something about like, well, it's my job to teach you to be a good person. And they all scoffed at me at like, no, that's not your job. And I was like, well, why do you think I'm here? Like, there's spell check and grammar check on every word processing software that you could ever have. Like, I don't need to teach you I before E except after C. I need to teach you like how do you think about the way that you communicate with people and why is that important? And I've been having those conversations like more one on one too. Like, this is why I teach novels, like to teach you how to view the world and be an empathetic person. Um, More than semicolons, which, they're important to me. Uh, Maybe that's not something that you need to know in order to progress, in your life.
Yeah. Ha- uh, Speaking of AI as a tool and just even your approach, like how how critical is personalization? I mean, obviously, teaching a classroom versus teaching individual students. I mean, we know teaching individual students is obviously the preferred way, but it obviously doesn't scale very well. Um, can you talk through how you see AI enabling more personalization in the work that you do?
So I have never been an early adopter of any technology, so I haven't played around with it enough to say, "Oh, it's so great for this." But I do think that it it can allow students to kinda explore things a little more on their own. I think that, teaching them to use it as, like, a research tool or giving feedback, all those, like, Grammarly and things like that where you can get feedback on your writing, um, which, takes a little bit of the burden off of me because now I'm not, necessarily revising 30 papers at once while they're in front of me. I think that's a really great use of it for personalization. And I think, again, going back to the idea of students need to have choices, right? That also allows me to say, like, you can read a book I haven't read before and you can write about it and I don't have to just trust that you're getting it. I can use AI and I can say, "Hey, can you write me a quick summary of this novel?" So that I can understand if they're getting it or not. I kind of see it going that way as more of a kind of like an assistant to me and an assistant to the students instead of something that's kind of taking the mental work, the thinking work out of it.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's also the kind of personalization. Like I've been doing a lot of AI courses, and hyper personalization is a big topic. And some in creepy ways, like advertising and things like that, right? Where you can get um, ads, tailored specifically to an individual, which I find super creepy. But
Yeah.
in an education setting, I think if you can feed a student profile into an AI, and it can give you personalized teaching methods for that particular student. I think maybe, like maybe some students learn better visually and some students learn
Mhm.
better, I don't know, like by writing or, whatever the case may be, whatever the different learning methods are or styles are. Do you see that as a potential tool, or do you find that creepy as well? I mean, I could see how that could be creepy as well, but what do you think about that?
I mean, it's all creepy. I'm definitely freaked out by it all the time.
Yeah.
But I think, like you said earlier, like the toothpaste is out of the tube, there's no getting it back. And I think it is about
Yeah.
harnessing it to use it where we can. And yeah, I think if I can say, hey, like you can use this to doubt a scene, and you can use this to draw it, and you can use this to write about it, I think that's great.
Lauren,
Yeah.
thinking a bit institutionally, how, like, obviously you're tasked with figuring a lot of this out on your own amongst your population, and I know there's curriculums and other, I guess, institutional, like, decisions that are being made that are being pushed down to you, like the example of like, wait, what do you mean we're not going to teach a book? We're going to teach an excerpt from a book? Like, that makes no sense to me. How do you see that conversation happening, and perhaps even other teachers that are trying novel approaches and finding ways in which a tool like AI can be deployed in a very positive way, in an encouraging way, in a successful way, to deliver, the goal of creating the workers of the future, and the individuals that can contribute to society in a positive way in the future, so that we can take what's working really well in a given institution or a given system and scale that out to the rest of the country, and still keep that personalization and, need for nuanced approaches across the different pockets of society at the forefront as well.
Huh. Yeah. I mean, the the US is a big place. And yeah, there's this idea that we can have this like one rule, one curriculum, one thing that we're all going to do that will help everybody. And I don't think that works. Um I think, and this is my viewpoint, but I think at some point we need to trust teachers, and we need to say, like, this is what you've been trained to do. This is what you've been doing for your whole career. You are a professional, and you can use it as you see fit. I don't think there's like a one size fits all approach. Um, I have been through many iterations of curricula that have been passed down to me from a school, from the district, from the city, from the state. Um, and it never works. There's so much that you have to do to fix it, to make it fit your kids, um, and your own particular teaching style as well. And I think that AI is the same. I mean, some people are just going to be completely uncomfortable with it and say, not in my classroom, not in my school. And there are going to be people who are more able to use it. And teaching is, I guess, like all industries where, like the younger people come in and they change things and they make it their own. So there's going to be the, 24-year-old teacher who comes in and teaches next door to me and is super excited to, ChatGPT every day. Whereas I'm more like, hey, we're writing on loose leaf for the next 6 months because I can't. Um, and I think all of that is okay. I think there's so much of teaching that's teachers fighting with people who are not teachers, about how we use things to reach our students. And I think it's okay to trust teachers. I think we have to do that.
I think I hear you in saying less bureaucracy and more trust.
Yes.
That resonates, I think, for every industry. Certainly the industries that Chirag and I work in, and it sounds like it resonates for the educational industry as well. And I think it's such an interesting, like within education specifically, trust is such an interesting word, because you almost have this, I don't know, like, inherent trust from parents that are sending their children into the school itself, and then you have the trust of the individuals that are then engaging with their children, and that we've all agreed to as a social contract is what we do. Um, I think as a parent, when you do send a child into a school, it is important on understanding what the values and, I guess, wishes and objectives of the individual school are, because that needs to align in some degree for there to be trust that, hey, yeah, I'm going to send my kid to this school. I have to, and you feel okay about it. And then that also inherently will influence the individual that are teaching in that school as well. Um, can you speak to that a little bit? Because obviously there's, like, I guess, the district, the individual school itself, and then there's the individual teacher. and how do you think, like, is that bureaucracy also broken, or do you think there is some trust still in that hierarchy?
Um, it depends. Like, teaching for so long in New York City, where the it's the largest school district in the country, and we are under the control of the mayor, right? So every 3 years, there's a new mayor, and then there's a new chancellor. And I don't know how much you know about what's going on in New York City right now, but we have a new chancellor again because of corruption and resignations and investigations and all kinds of things. So every few years, there's some kind of new thing that's passed down to us where it's like, here's our initiative now. Now we're online, and so it's as much as we have to have the people that trust the teachers, it's also the teachers trusting the people in charge, the district, who are often not educators. Um, I think for the most part, there is trust that we're doing things for the right reasons. I think that's what the ultimate baseline is, right? I trust that you're telling me this because you want me to be able to reach children and help children and help them get where they need to go. Um, but especially in the current climate that we're in, there's so much of not trusting other people's agendas who are, politically motivated. Like, I don't necessarily trust that you're doing this because you want me to be a better teacher always. I might, suspect that you're doing this because it looks good for this election year. And it's really hard to parse all that out. But I think for the most part, at least with like parents that I've interacted with, it does seem like people trust that we're kind of all in this together. And we're just all doing the best we can. It's just that we might not know what the best is.
Yeah. What a very positive perspective and encouraging perspective. I think that's such a I think that that's the maturity of a process that is undergoing through very, very rapid transformation, whether it's through technology, whether it's through coming out of a pandemic. But clearly all of us as a society are in a very, I would say, transitory state. I don't like we're definitely not in a steady state that's predictable. I mean, Chirag and I talk about, like, and I'm sure you experience this. Of course, you're in this, and you're in this industry. Like, we like most of what my kids are even still learning now is very much from the Industrial Revolution. Like, we still have bells that tell kids to go from one classroom to the other.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't fit with like how much we need to transform our education system to support modern society and the way that we work. And um, it's encouraging that you are feeling, and that we have teachers like you that are taking on the responsibility of teaching our children good values to be good people, and owning that, and like breaking the and setting that as an expectation of when children come in your classroom and say, yeah, that is what I want to do. And that's super encouraging from my perspective. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's a balance to be struck, right? Like you said, that all the upheaval every 3 years probably isn't great to experience, but then you also want to make sure that you're advancing the profession and the industry, right? So how do you strike that balance? So I'm sure that's a struggle for everyone, and hopefully we can figure it out as we move forward.
Yeah.
Awesome. Should we do some rapid fire?
Yeah, let's end on a more lighthearted note. So yeah, let's see, Lauren, what's the most surprising thing a student has taught you?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, I so for some reason when you said that, what went into my head was not what they taught me, it was what they said, and I have this very vivid memory of this is when I was teaching 6th graders and it was an all-girls school. And a student came up to me, I guess it was like the end of lunch or something. She had had a little bit of free time and she said, Miss Escobar, look how good I am at fingering. And I was like, what? She had made, I don't know if you guys know the that weaving thing with the like you wrap rubber bands around your fingers and then you pull the one up and eventually you have like a long
Yeah.
scarf. You can make a bracelet, whatever. And she had made a very long one. And
Yeah.
and it so I guess what she taught me was how to how to control my face because I had to say, "Oh, wow, you did such a wonderful job. You are very good at finger weaving." That's good there. Um,
Wow, that's fantastic.
That's awesome. Oh man, that's a good one. That is a great one. All
Yeah.
right, let's go to another one. If you had an AI assistant in your classroom, what would you name it, and what would be the first task that you would give it?
oh, what would I name? I know what I would have it do. I would definitely have it grade all the horrible essays that are sitting on my desk. Um, and
Oh,
give
I have a
each
suggestion for a name, Lauren. Since I know your history a little bit, I'd say you'll miss.
and that would be actually perfect. I would love that. Yeah, so humans would do all of my grading, definitely.
That's awesome.
Let's see the next one. AI generated homework, friend or foe?
Does that mean that it generates the assignment or that it doesn't?
Yeah, it generates the
Either
assignment for you.
Oh,
assignment, yeah.
friends. Friend.
Yeah. How about on the other
Definitely
end?
thinking of like that busy work kind of stuff. I hate doing.
Sorry, Trug. Yeah, no, you
Yeah,
were
I
going to
think
say, what about on the other
no,
end too?
yeah, no, I mean, that's fine. But I think, yeah, just to iterate that point, I think people probably don't realize how much teachers put in outside the classroom, right? Like, not between school hours.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, one book or movie you would assign to every student.
That's a great question. That's something that should be like easy because I think about it all the time. But what I've been assigning a lot lately is "It Feels You Could Talk" by James Baldwin. Um, and every time a kid like happens to pull it off the shelf, I'm like, everyone should read this. It's just this like beautiful and it's so timeless. So yeah, I think that's my answer. And the movie's well done. They made it was like 5, 6 years ago, and I think it's still on Netflix. So if you don't have time to read it, you should watch it.
And finally, what's the most creative excuse that a student's given you for not turning in their homework or that they're ready to take a test?
I wish they were creative. It's always the same. It's I'm tired. I was sick, or I had a lot of work. Like if they gave me a creative excuse, I'd be like, "You got an A. Like you don't have to do it."
It's like trying to get out of a traffic ticket or something with the cop, right?
Yeah,
Like
like
if you can.
I'm tired of the I was too tired, or I was sick and my mom also had a runny nose.
So, to any students out there listening, come up with creative excuses, and maybe your teacher will let you get away with
Yes, you will totally get away with it. Impress me.
it.
All right, man. I think we can wrap it here, Lauren. This was super fantastic, and it gave me a lot to think about, and hopefully the audience has got have got their gears moving in how education is continuing to evolve, how AI can further be developed to help educators and ensure we're creating citizens that are going to be productive in the future. So certainly invite our listeners to share their thoughts and the role on AI is going to create in education in the future. And we'll certainly continue to talk about this in the future as well. So thanks so much.
Thank you. This was fun. Thanks so
Yeah,
much.
thanks so much, Lauren. We really appreciate it. And we've been trying to end our episodes on a quote, which we haven't been doing consistently, but I thought this was a good one to end with a quote. So we'll end with education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. And that's by William Butler Yeats. So we thought
Oh,
that was a good one.
That's a
yeah,
great one.
awesome.
I love that.
Yeah. So thanks for all you do, Lauren, as a teacher, and to all the teachers out there. I mean, our society couldn't exist without them. So yeah, thanks for everything. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
That's the pod. Thanks all.
That's a pod. Thanks, everyone. Until next time.